So let's begin with day three of Ellen's keynotes study streak. And today's three remedies that we'll discuss, out of which the first remedy, which is one of the most underrated remedies for common prescriptions, and misunderstood also. The first remedy which I would discuss is Ipecac. Now, when we read the first line, very first line in Allen's keynotes, it is mentioned that in all the diseases with continual and constant nausea, if you have a case where there is constant nausea, you can prescribe it. But it does not mean that if there is no nausea, you don't prescribe Ipecac. You have to understand the meaning behind it. So, constant and continual nausea means that there is an effect on the pneumogastric nerve, and if you have a patient which has that impact, it can be excess salivation, it can be excess of nausea, it can be excess of gastric disturbance which they cannot explain. Think of Ipecac. The second thing what is mentioned is hemorrhages which are active and which are bright red from all the orifices. So it's a remedy which is, in the initial phases of inflammation. It's not a remedy which you will prescribe in later stages or in stages where pathologies have advanced. And this is one of the most underrated locations, underrated, understanding for a homeopath. It is a remedy on par with aconite, bravania, arsenic, pulsatilla for your normal cold, cough, and normal fever cases. So, if you read the next line, the third line, which says oversensitive to heat and cold. Now, in Boric, if you have gone through three summer remedies and the Ipecac Twitter link, which I had posted in my bio, you will see that I had taken one very peculiar rubric where Ipecac is the only remedy present in extremes of weather aggravates. So you can see how important it is once these remedies are mentioned singularly in any particular rubric. Same is mentioned in Allen's keynotes. It is mentioned in plain sentence, plain language. It is not bold, but whatever is mentioned in Allen is of prime importance. So we come to a line where it is mentioned oversensitive to heat and cold. Followed by it, we see a line which is mentioned pain, which is something like eupatorium perfoliatum, where the patient feels that the body is broken or there is bony pain and there is discomfort. So in such cases where fever has not so much developed and the patient is reporting to you in the first initial few hours, 6 to 8 hours or 12 hours of them developing complaints, gastric or respiratory or feverish complaints, think of Ipecac. Going to the lines further mentioned in Ellen, it says cough, which is dry, spasmodic, constricted, asthmatic, and difficult breathing, and whooping cough where child loses breath. So, it's not mentioned that there is a complete collapse, but the child loses breath, turns pale and stiff, and there is strangling, gagging, and vomiting of mucus, and then the child feels better. So, this phase where there is a struggle between accumulation of some deposits from the nasal cavity or the throat cavity to the respiratory cavity should give you a clear indication of Ipecac. And there is a threatening of mucus, threatened suffocation from mucus, which Ellen says in further lines, and especially when there is inspiration, just like antimtar. So I would say that if it is initial phases, you have to understand when the disease started, onset, duration, progress, and ask the patient about the progress of symptoms. If they have progressed gradually, not so fast, and the vitality is still strong, you can think of Ipecac before thinking of Antemtart, because Antemtart, which we will discuss today as the third remedy, also has deeper pathologies and accumulation of gastric or respiratory mucus in certain areas. So now, going to further lines which have been mentioned, there is a clean tongue which we all know, which we by heart from right from our college days to our practicing days, and we also try to confirm from our patients. There can be a possibility that you will get it. It's not sure that you will get it, but there will be one symptom which is strong, which I have confirmed many times, and that is profuse salivation with many complaints. In fact, in the Kent repertory, you will see that salivation before fevers, Ipecac and Rustox are the only two remedies mentioned. Ipecac being one of the remedies, you can strongly think of this remedy in such fevers or feverish complaints where salivation is profusely present, or you can see the tongue is very wet. You are thinking of mug salt कि mug salt में ज़्यादा salivation होता है तो हम लोग ये दे दें. It shouldn't be thought that way. Mug salt has its own class of indications, but ipecac can be thought in initial cases of fevers or cold and cough where there is moist tongue, profuse saliva, nausea-like feeling, or there can be just a clean tongue with some sort of saliva, staying there in the tongue. And there is vomiting and without any relief, and sleepy, which is also mentioned. Then further we go, there is a feeling that the stomach is relaxed and hanging down. I don't know, I have not encountered so far this particular symptom, so we'll have to go to the provings and find out what it was, how it was. But there is a kind of a colic also, which is mostly around the navel area, around the umbilicus, and also it can be indicated in children who have green and grassy stools, especially like the remedy colchicum. And there is a kind of an active bloody discharge also from the stools, which we can experience somewhere if we ask the patient. Going further, we see that there is autumnal dysentery, cold nights after hot days. So everywhere in India right now, we are experiencing a transition season, and there is a transition from hot to cold. So there will be cold night after hot days. There will be gastric troubles, there will be respiratory troubles, there will be nasal troubles, or something which is in between all these areas. Think of ipecac as one of the top remedies, and you will never fail in those cases. And there are some cutting pains from left and right. Sometimes patients do describe about those pains, sometimes they don't describe. There is a comparison. I will put up the slides, the images later on in the profile. You can definitely go through it. And there is a periodicity of complaints. It can be nausea, it can be fever, it can be kind of gastric dyspepsia, which is there every day at the same hour. In female reproductive system, Ellen mentions that there is uterine bleeding, which is with some respiratory troubles, or there is a hemorrhage with the respiratory troubles, and the pain around the umbilical region. You may uh, corroborate the same thing from the patient. And last but not the least, in the fever part for Ipecac, Ellen has mentioned that in the beginning of irregular cases in intermittent fever, this remedy can be thought. You go to all the source books, and Jar, which is one of the very leading practitioners, leading stalwarts of our homeopathic field, he mentions that this remedy he has given in all the confused cases of initial fevers, or just to begin with, when there are fever symptoms in any case, and the fevers have resolved and not palliated or suppressed. So you can think of this remedy, which is on the lines of like the aconite and belladonna and the bryonia and the arsenic and the pulsatilla, which you think in most of the cases, think of ipecac as one of the top remedies for uh, beginning cases of fever. There will be gastric disturbances, there will be nausea, etc., etc. And the complementary remedy or similar remedy you will see is mentioned as cuprum. It has a similar action, which has spasms and an advanced pathology, which we'll discuss when we take up cuprum in few days. And this remedy ipecac is followed by arsenic in cases of influenza. So if you have given arsenic, you feel that patient is not improving, the symptoms are stagnant, think of this remedy. And if respiratory complaints are there, think of uh, ipecac along with entimtart with the symptoms which I shared. The next remedy, which is very similar to ipecac, is antimcrude. And for entim crude and entim tart, which I'll be taking up very soon, the next after entim crude, I have just one sentence to help you understand. And if you have attended the previous session, which I took on three summer remedies, I had very clearly mentioned that there is a kind of a mucus stasis in entim crude. So if there is mucus stasis on the gastric area, gastric level, think of antim crude. If there is mucus stasis on the respiratory level, respiratory area, think of antim tar. That's the only thing you need to understand. And there will be symptoms of ipecac, more or less, with the nausea, with the, you know, kind of cross behavior which patient does not want a physician to touch or does not cooperate with the physician. It can be a child, it can be a teenager. Think of intim-crude and intim-tart in those cases. Now going to what Ellen has mentioned, it is similar to calcarea carb in patients who are inclined to grow fat and in extremes of life. So again, you can think of this remedy as pediatric and geriatric remedy. And children who cannot bear to be touched, they do not want to be looked at. They are, whenever we just try to examine, they'll throw a fit or temper, or they will get restless, or they'll get, they'll start howling and crying, or the moment they see you or the moment you touch them, it will start. So mostly it will be when you touch them rather than when you see them. uh, in few cases you will also see that as soon as they enter the clinic, they will start crying as you see them, but if you don't see them do your work, they will also get silent. This is very important clinical observation that you need to keep in mind when you see pediatric cases. There is great sadness with weeping mentioned by Ellen. So you can see this element of sadness, weeping, loathing of life. There is irresistible desire to talk in rhymes and verse. This comes from also the sentimental mood. All these come from the sulfur element in the antimony. And if you understand sulfur very well, you will be able to understand antim crude very well. And antimony sulf is the remedy which you can think in teenagers who have got disappointed due to a bad relationship, or who did not find good results from their performance, what they are doing in their school or college. And similar also is for calcarea phos, which we see now again in Ellen. Further down the line, for gastric symptoms, he mentions that there is longing for acids and pickles. So Fatak mentions very well in his materia medica that antim crude is like, crude at the level of mind and at the level of body. So you have this person who is very snappish, who is very weepy, who is very repugnant to people around him, and he also longs for such things which are not liked by few, majority of the people, like acids and pickles. So this is one of the areas, and it cannot bear the heat of sun, it gets aggravated, which we all know. So areas where you see a lot of sun, and either they are working or traveling in sun, or they have come from sun and some complaints have developed, think of this remedy. And when symptoms change from one location to another location, so just like pulsatilla, just like sanicula, just like changeability of symptoms, you can see this also in antimicrobe. Now there is also aversion to cold bathing, which comes from the sulfur element. So child cries when he is given a bath or when he is put in water, and it causes a lot of troubles like suppression of menses or cold and cough from bathing in cold water. Again, headache also happens from that. Now there is in respiratory for and include Ellen mentions that there is lot of mucus which is accumulated in the posterior nails. So you see this mucus stasis. If you understand mucus stasis, these two words for antim crude and antim tart, half of your job is done. That's where when you understand their tongue, in the tongue also there is mucus stasis. The mucus has not cleared. In the gastric also the mucus stasis has happened. It has not cleared. It has to flush out. and that is where the complaints begin, and that is where the entire psychology of the patient changes. So there is whooping cough also from being overheated. From being overheated, you will see many complaints happening for antim crude. It is difficult to elicit, but if you try to understand, for example, once I had a case where this lady, old lady, had developed respiratory troubles. She had been going to different allopathic doctors and didn't improve, and she was very angry, and the daughter told me that she keeps on shouting at us, and they stayed in slum area, so I had to literally go and visit her, and what I saw was there was a cement asbestos sheet at the roof which had heated the entire home. So even though I had gone in the evening around 5 or 5:30, it was per steaming hot like a microwave oven. So in these cases, you can think of antim crude. People who stay in those areas where there is a lot of heat in their roof, which has heated up the entire room, you can think of antim crude, which gives a kind of symptoms which are similar to being overheated. Now, of course, this lady also improved with antim crude, which I have recorded, documented this case. So all the symptoms and reportization I undertake in my sessions. If anyone would like to join any sessions, they can just ping, and we'll give the details what sessions we covered so far and what sessions we'll be covering in future. Next is gastric complaints from overeating. So overeating causes problem, and there is complaints from bread, pastries, or also eating sour and vinegar related foods, Chinese foods especially, and constant discharge of flatus, which is kind of stuck up and they keep on belching because there is non clearance of gastric mucosa, which causes the problem again. In skin, you see a state which again makes you feel that you shouldn't see because it's so dirty. So if you don't see the mentality of anti-improved in a person, it will be seen in skin, especially in adults, where the skin is very dirty to look, and maybe you don't want to see it, or the patient is kind of showing again and again the skin problem, maybe on the hand or the leg. I had a case, and it was so dirty to look at that you can't bear to look at for a few minutes, and that's where you should think of antim crude. So apart from that, it has hard corns, large corns on the soles of the feet, just like ranunculus bulbosus. So they are sensitive to walk, and there are some skin issues, especially on the nostrils and the edges of the lips, labile commissures. And you have a comparison with squilla. I have tried to search for some explanations. Very rare explanations are available why it is compared with squilla. Maybe we need to dig in deeper to find out what is the comparison exactly about. So mucus stasis at the gastric level. Think about antim crude, overeating causing problem, and extremes of life will give you antim crude. This is a remedy which is similar to iodum, silica, sanicula, pulsatilla in many some of the aspects which I described, and of course ipecac also at some areas. And next we come to is antim tart. Now antim tart has a special hydrogenoid constitution, and if you have the monsoon started in your region, you will see that this is one of the top remedies that you should think of, and especially in areas where there is lot of damp in the entire wall due to a leakage, or there has been a constant exposure to water or a source of water around. These are the complaints which give origin to antim tart state. And because you have the combination of ipecac and antim crude in this, you will see that the child clings constantly to someone who is around, and again it will not let you touch or feel the pulse, similar to antim crude and sanicula. There will be a lot of sleepiness. Now why does sleepiness happen? One of the top reasons is that there is mucus stasis in the respiratory area, which causes the breathing to be disturbed. Another thing is that it also acts on the cerebellum, that is where it gives the sense of sleepiness also to some patients which are of that type. And in damp, when the damp weather commences, which is what I told you, in many of the locations in India, you can think of this remedy, because it is having specific action on damp areas and damp waters. Now, what is mentioned for antimtart in the respiratory sphere is that when the patient coughs, there is accumulation of large mucus in the bronchi, but very little comes up or nothing comes up. So you have a case where the patient is constantly giving some noise from the chest, or there is a cough which is trying to come out but he cannot bring out. There is paralysis of the local muscles and he cannot bring out. There is asphyxian mechanical or neonatorum, and there is drowsiness, sleepiness, so the muscles can't work. That is where you should think of antimtart. It relieves the death rattle. Now, how many of you have been seeing pediatric cases, especially in NICU? You will need this remedy. If you get a chance to put even a few drops of this remedy to children who are landing in pneumonia, or they are kind of asphyxiated, think of this remedy. It is similar to tarantula, which is what Ellen mentions. Again, the tongue is coated, mucostasis is there. There is extraordinary craving for apples, and if there is extraordinary craving for pickles, you should think of antimcrude. And now you will see the element of ipecac, which is vomiting, and there is followed by drowsiness and prostration. If there is respiratory complaints or gastric complaints with cold sweat on the forehead, think of this remedy on par with veratrum. Uh, Last but not the least, for aggravation, it's mentioned that damp, cold weather or lying down at night aggravates. So you'll see people or children who go to sleep, asthmatics or bronchitis related complaints that start as soon as they go to lie down. Think of this remedy, and maybe you can give it before they go to sleep or few hours before they go to sleep, so that the complaint is readily averted totally. And change of weather causes a complaint, just like kali sulf and natrum sulf. So natrum sulf is another remedy which is kind of a hydrogenoid remedy. Now, in relationship, it is mentioned that it is similar to lycopodium. The only difference being that lycopodium has a spasmodic motion of the LNSI, whereas antim-tart will always have the dilated nasi, because it wants to use all the accessory muscles of respiration and all means to throw out the waste products and the air breathing to be regulated. It is also similar to veratrum album. I remember a very nice case which I had cured, especially in summer season. One young teenager had in the summer season for diarrhea, and he was just collapsed, and he called me at his home because he couldn't move a single moment. And I had given him veratrum album based upon the entire collapse of the system and cold sweat on the forehead, and he improved drastically by veratrum album 1 m every 10 minutes. So high potency and frequent repetition, if you have an acute, cling to it, stick to it, and you will see good results within a few hours, not even few days. Now, the last line, what is mentioned, last but not the least, I would say, is when lungs seem to fail, the patient becomes sleepy and the cough declines or ceases, it supplants ipecac. So if it should be something like, if you see a patient in beginning with few symptoms of cough, coryza, cold, fever, gastric disturbance, you start with ipecac. If the patient is not improved, or maybe the disease has progressed where ipecac is not working, you review in few hours and give antimtart as a higher potency or with a frequent repetition, and you will see good results within a few hours, because Ipecac and Entimtat are kind of a complementary remedy. The state of Ipecac, if not cured, progresses to Entimtat. This is what you need to understand. And only through comparison and understanding remedies in a linear fashion, you will be able to prescribe them and see the state of patient in the clinic from the onset duration progress. Bad effects of vaccination, one of the top remedies. We memorize this from our school the days or college days, school days, because first BHMS is just like school for all of us. We start with ABC of homeopathy. So Thuja and Silica is you know not working, Entimtat will work. One of the cases where similarly I recollect where chicken pox was there and there was a lot of back pain, lower back pain, and I had given Entimtat, and within you know you can't stop the disease at all totally, but you can minimize the number of days. So instead of 6 to 7 days for the disease to progress, Entimtat worked in 3 days, 3 to 4 days, and the patient had very reduced backache, and the vesicles which were there, they evolved and matured soon to relieve the patient. So there was an irritation which the patient had, and it was spread all across the body. So with Entimtat, he improved. And I was thinking of silica or Muxol in that case, but the constant backache which he had, he couldn't move from his chair. He just kept sitting in one place. That helped me prescribe Entimtat. So apart from that, last line what is mentioned is that children which are not easily impressed with Entimtat seems indicated when Entimtat seems indicated in coughs require Hepar sulf. So you see this linear progression. Ipecac, if not working, think of Entimtat. If not working, think of Hepar sulf. Now there will be a stage where the patient reports to you with kind of a sleepiness, drowsiness, nausea, thick coated tongue, and the stage of Ipecac has gone. Think of Entimtat. And if Entimtat has not worked, think of Hepar sulf. If there will be a stage where there is lot of air sensitivity, uh, constant cough from the exposure to air, uh, there will be throat in the pain, and patient wants covers or he is discomforted, you can think of Hepar sulf directly without even thinking of Ipecac or Entimtar. So there is a evolution of symptoms which sometimes you need to depend on, and maybe prescribe either of the remedies initially directly, or else in a series one after the other if they are not working based upon the indications which you have seen. So that's all from the day 3 of Ellen's keynotes study streak, and I hope it is helping. If you all have any questions related to case taking, uh, today's remedies, or reporterization, materia medica, please feel free to comment below in the Instagram or YouTube. We are doing live simultaneously so that maximum benefit to those who are watching can happen, and we make a move once you've asked for any questions or you don't have any questions. So we okay, Dr. Rashida Popat, thanks for joining, and I hope we continue this streak for maximum number of days to cover all the remedies from Allen's keynotes. Then we'll take up a new book for new learning with some personal experiences which I have had from my practice, because homeopathy is pretty simple. These are the books which a homeopath should memorize and practice, rather than the different methods that we memorize and practice, because it becomes difficult when we try to learn methods, but it's easy when we try to learn the basic stuff which we have. So thank you all for joining, and we make a move